do a little bit of chicken feed. This is chicken pellets that you would use. I borrowed some from my neighbor who raises chickens. Oh, look at that. That is a lot of worms. Found a handful of cocoons here to show you. You can see. Hello YouTube gardening fans. Today I'm going to be doing a feeding on my worms. I started out in this urban worm bag with 500 worms, which is roughly half a pound of worms. And yesterday was Thanksgiving here, and I was planning on feeding them some of the leftovers we had. And so here we go. I have well over 1,000, maybe even 1,500 worms in here now. I'll go ahead and fold this up. You'll probably see a lot of worms hiding on this. They like to hide on this side of the inside of the bubble wrap. I've had the lights on here for 5 or 10 minutes while I've been setting up, which is why there's no worms here on the surface. Normally I have them scattered all over the top. But to start off, I'm going to go ahead and kind of fluff things up here a little bit and see what we can see. Gently going down in there, and see that I got lots of baby worms going on. Can't remember what I had down there for this feeding. That was more baby worms. And you know what? I'm gonna check for some cocoons on this other side before I mix it up, because usually I can find a bunch of cocoons on top. Might have already buried them and disturbed them. Found a handful of cocoons here to show you. You can see some of them are empty. Some kind of that more greenish colored looking one right there at the top has a nice healthy one. I think it looks pretty young. Anyway, it's kind of fun to see. Definitely have a healthy bin if you have signs of cocoons and babies hatching. Saw some pill bugs in here as well. Not sure if that's technically what they're called. We call them potato bugs here. And I'm going to fluff up over here. I've done quite a few big feedings over the past month or so. I want to get an idea of where the worms are at and where the decomposition is at. Ooh, there's a big ball of worms. I think that's inside of a banana peel. Yep, that looks like a banana peel. They like sneaking inside things like that. I put toilet paper rolls in there and fill them with different foods, and you'll find lots of worms hanging out inside of those. They just like being combined in things for some reason. Let's see what else we can find. Oh, there's another big ball of worms. That's looking good. That's awesome. And so many worms. So good. The health of my bin has been doing really well. I'm happy with this urban worm bag. In the past I've had homemade Tupperware tote bins, and I've always seemed to have troubles with moisture. Oh, there's some leftover avocado. I remember that. There was some avocado that had gone bad. Looks like it's not really breaking down quite yet, so they're not feeding on it actively as they could be. Go down on this side here, fluff it up. I haven't fluffed any of this up for quite a while. Not too many there. Moisture is okay. It might be a little bit dry. I put the bedding in. I'm going to make sure it's sprayed down. Looks it's about 4 weeks ago I put some cabbage down here, some shredded cabbage. And I'm not seeing any of it. So they've easily taken care of that. There's an old avocado shell. Stick that aside here. I can feel lots of castings. You can see I don't have hardly any bedding showing up right now. The bedding is mostly shredded paper and shredded cardboard. Things like that is what I use. Mixed with cocoa coir sometimes. Bunch of pill bugs. Okay, so overall things are looking really healthy in here, really good. Just a little bit dry. I'm happy to see it though. I need to harvest some of these castings soon. I'm going to be doing some stuff in my greenhouse, and I want to have some worm casting tea that I've made so I can really help get the plants off to a good start. It's only November here, but in my greenhouse I have it climate controlled, so I'm keeping stuff warm all winter, and I'm able to grow things all winter for fun out there. And sometimes I have stuff that'll last long enough, and after potting up a few times, that I can plant them outside in the spring. Spring for us, typically we don't plant until around Mother's Day, but it depends on the year, especially nowadays that things seem to be changing a little bit. And start off with the food. I made too much sweet potato for the sweet potato pie yesterday. Got half an avocado that's gone bad. The other half I have saved for a different mini worm bin that I'm working on. And here we go. I'm going to start off with some bedding. Make sure I get some good bedding down. And as I mentioned, mostly shredded cardboard and paper. I'm going to wet it down. I just have a pump spray water bottle canister, one of these guys. I use distilled water or reverse osmosis water from our filter, just because I don't want to harm any bacteria that are in here. Let's see how that's getting. All the food that I put on here is also going to add some moisture, but I don't see any bedding in here, and it's really difficult to have too much bedding. So I like the fact that I can add a bunch, absorb some of the moisture from the food I put in, but then also give the worms something to feed on, especially if I'm a little bit light on food or go a little bit too long in between feedings. So that's all pretty damp now. I'm going to go ahead and squirt some of the sweet potatoes on here. From a different YouTube channel, I saw somebody that mentioned how sweet potatoes are good to use in their breeding bins. They like to use them in there because it has all of the stuff that they really need to get going on breeding and have healthy cocoons and healthy worms overall. Get that in there. Okay. So avocados, I love it because they make worm balls in there. The worms all crawl up inside and eat that and hide out in there, and they just love it in there. We'll check back in a few days and show that. But I like to get some of the soil up there. There's some worms there, as you can see. I'm going to go ahead and put that face down. The worms will go right in there and have a good time with that. When I did this feeding last, I mentioned that the worms like to crawl up inside the avocados, so I want to give it a little check here and see if they've balled up inside this one, so I can show you guys what I was talking about. Yeah, you see that? That's awesome. A lot of worms there. And I'm disturbing them now, but just wanted you guys to be able to see that. They really like the avocados. That is a pretty good worm ball right there. Pretty impressive. Let's get them back so they can get back to eating and doing their thing. One thing I didn't mention is when worms are gathered, when they mate, they just need to make contact with each other. And so when you're sticking things like avocados in and they're all gathering in one place, that increases the likelihood of mating to happen. So it's just a little quick update. Another 2 or 3 days and I'll dig in there deeper and show you what happened to all the food that we put in last time. Then this isn't exactly from Thanksgiving, but it's some of the scraps that I've been saving. I like to put them in the freezer first. It helps break the cell walls of the fruits and vegetables. It aids in breaking down decomposition, stuff like that. They love strawberries. So I'm going to give them about that many strawberries, and I'm also going to hang on to some of the other strawberries for my next bin. And corn is a favorite of theirs too. Every time I put corn in, they flock to it. Another strawberry in my hand. You can see all of this stuff is wet. That you can tell that I had it in the freezer because everything's just leaking all the juices out because of the cell walls being ruptured in the freezer. Okay. Now, with every feeding, I like to put on char. It's not yet biochar because it's not been inoculated with any bacteria. But I sprinkle on some char. I will have future videos about biochar and the making of biochar and the benefits of biochar. Excuse me. Birdseed is something they really like, and this birdseed is the really cheap stuff from any big box store. I found that they love it. I can put a pile of it on top And you'll come back just the next day and there'll be worms all over it, and they'll be enjoying the meal. And next thing I like to put is some eggshell. The worms use eggshell, the grit from it. You can put sand in as well, fine sand. But they use that and it helps them to grind up their food in their gizzard, kind of like a chicken, how the chicken has to have a gizzard to grind up their food and help break it down. From my friend here down the street who raises rabbits, I get some manure from him, some rabbit pellets. And the worms seem to really like these as well. Since they're all dry, I don't smell anything, so it's not making anything stinky. So I'm adding those. That gets some different bacteria. The strawberries are from different places. The potatoes probably have no bacteria on them, or at least not much, because they were boiled for so long. But all of the vegetables, everything I put in here has a different, microbiota on it. It adds to the variety, and everything makes the worm castings more nutrient rich. So at this point, I want to give it another little squirt down, just because we were dry on the dry side of things. Okay, go ahead and bury all of this up. Get the old avocado back down. That old shell I'll get back in there. Those will eventually break down, but they do take long, especially compared to the flesh of the avocado. So as of right now, you can see how it's kind of mounded up where I buried the food. Get that avocado down there. Where I buried the food, it's kind of a mound. But when we come back and it's all broken down, it'll either be flat or even sometimes it's concaved. Makes a little dip where the food was, because the worms break it all down in such small pieces. And they move it around other places in the bin too as they're crawling around and putting out their castings elsewhere. Castings obviously is the common term for worm manure. Worm poop is what it is. Let's call it what it is here. But it's a wonderful addition to your garden. Anyway, I think that's about it for today. So that's a pretty big feeding. We'll come back and check on this in, I don't know, maybe a week to 10 days and show you the progress. Okay, in the previous segment, I mentioned how I had hardly any bedding in my worm bin, and I want to take care of that today. So I've got some cocoa coir here and some water and a bunch of shredded paper. I'm going to mix some of that up and get it a little bit damp, and then add that to the worm bin and hopefully pull in some more bedding and make sure the worms are comfortable. I don't know if you've ever seen a cocoa coir brick. This is about half of a brick, maybe a little bit less. It's pretty cool stuff. It comes really compressed. I'm going to add some water. This water here is non-chlorinated water. Just so we can make sure I don't have any of the bacteria or anything in the worm bin. So I'll just leave that be for a minute. You'll see the water soak in and the brick will expand. I don't want it to be soggy or soaking wet, so I'm going to start off with a little bit light on the water, I should say. There it goes. You can see it expanding, soaking up that water. Pretty cool. Go ahead and get that down in the water. Speed things up here a little bit. See the water draining slowly away. Pretty impressive stuff. Totally dry in the middle, has not even reached the middle. As far as non-chlorinated water, you can just put water in a bucket and let it sit out for about 24 hours. Or if I don't need very much, I used to buy distilled water from the grocery store in 1 gallon sizes. But now I have a reverse osmosis filter hooked up at my house, so I just use that. Or rainwater. That's my favorite thing to use, is rainwater. I collect rainwater. But considering it's freezing outside, literally, can't collect rainwater right now. It's all solid. Yeah, that's a little bit wet, but that's okay because we're going to be adding some of the shredded paper. Shredded cardboard and paper. Start with that much, see how it goes. So how you know if your bedding is wet enough or too wet, just take a handful, and if you squeeze it, you shouldn't be able to get any drops of water out. I can clearly get some water out. I shouldn't say you shouldn't be able to get any. You should be able to get about maybe 1 or 2 drops at the most out. So get a handful of it and squeeze, see if any drops come out, and then you know if you've got it about right. Worm castings are pretty potent. You don't need much to benefit the plants in your garden. When I'm planting my plants out in the spring or in the summer, I usually just grab a small handful, like a 1/4 cup or less, for my 1 pint plants, or hardly even any, you know, just a small handful if I'm doing just little 6-cell plants or something like that. It gets the beneficial bacteria and some micronutrients and macronutrients in there, but it's mostly about getting the beneficial bacteria in there that'll really help your soil and help your plant get what it needs. Starting to get pretty close now. I can still get some drops out and some more handfuls. Another beneficial thing to do with worm castings is to make a worm casting tea, if you will. There's whole books on that. There's YouTube videos on that. There's so many differing opinions from different experts on how you should do it, how you shouldn't do it. Should you brew it with an air bubbler? Should you just kind of rinse it and agitate it and then use it immediately? There's so many different schools of thought on that. I think if you're just trying and you're doing any of it, trying to get some of it in there, you're on the right track at least. You're trying to make a difference in your garden. But I'd study it. I'll have other videos on there with a little bit more specific information. But for the sake of this video, I don't want it to go too long. I like making a little bit of a tea out of it, where I just put it in a paint strainer bag. They're pretty cheap. You can buy them on Amazon or at any local paint supply store, probably even a big box store if they carry paint. But it's a 5-gallon bucket paint strainer. It's just basically like a reusable giant tea bag. And you can put worm castings or compost in that. Stick it in a bucket full of water and really agitate it roughly. And it'll knock off a bunch of the bacteria that's contained on the worm castings with the compost. So I can get about 3 or 4 drops out of it. I'm gonna let that soak for a minute, but to finish my thought, yeah, get the bacteria and other micronutrients out of the castings in the compost. You can put it in a tank sprayer and walk around. You can do foliar feeding with it, or you can drench the soil with it, and it's all beneficial stuff that you're putting in there, and it really helps the biology of the soil. It helps the diversity in the soil, and just the right thing to be doing for your plants and your garden as a whole. There's lots of fascinating research that's fairly new on it. Again, there's books on it. I can't go into all the detail of everything I've read, and I'm not going to pretend that I remembered everything or even understood everything. But there's lots of really interesting stuff about it. So for now, I'm going to let that soak, see if the paper soaks up the remainder of the moisture. I could get a few more than 1 or 2 drops out. So hopefully it'll soak up and dry out a little bit. If not, I'll add another handful or 2 of paper in there and go forward from there. It has been 10 days. I told you I'd check back on this bin and see how much food they've eaten and if they've taken care of our last feeding, which was a pretty big feeding. So it's been 10 days now. I'll fold that up, let you see some of the worms on there. Like I mentioned last time, they really like hiding in this bubble wrap. I think it keeps them about the right moisture that they like to be at. Sometimes I'll even see the smaller worms. I don't see any right now, but sometimes they'll crawl up inside one of these bubbles that's been popped, curl up inside the bubble and just hang out. At first I thought maybe they died in there, the ones that I started seeing, but they've all crawled out since then. Must be okay. Got a stowaway there. Move this to the side. So when I first filled this bin up, it was probably up to here. And after they start consuming all the organic material and breaking it down, it's a lot smaller and finer. And you can see these are some really good looking castings right here. Yeah, they're mixed with worms, and later on I'll show you how I like to sift the worms out from the castings and separate the two. But in this particular bin, it's a flow-through system, which means you take the castings out of the bottom. There's a zipper pouch on the bottom of this bag, which is one of the reasons I really like this bag so much. But the castings in the bottom are theoretically totally done and not very many worms hanging out in there because it's mostly just castings. Near the top where I keep feeding them everything, there's food to keep the worms interested in staying up here at the top. These particular worms don't like burrowing too deep. They are usually within the top 3 to 6 inches of soil. And it's going to be the same for inside a worm bin or a vermi bag like this. So the feeding I did last time was right down the middle. I'm going to go ahead and dig this up here with my hand, scoop it up, and see what there is left, see what we can identify. I can see something right here. I believe that's the avocado that I also showed you from the previous segment, how they made a nice worm ball underneath the avocado. Still a nice worm ball. Yep, they love it. I told you they love those avocados. There's a little bit of warmth in here, which means some of the stuff is composting. Oh, look at that. That is a lot of worms. Fantastic. I'm going to kind of scoot them over here while we dig down the center here. Try and be soft so I don't harm any of the worms that are there. But let's see what more worms. Imagine that. This worm bin is definitely healthy and multiplying. This looks like a, well, that's just another fat worm here. What is that? I can't quite tell what that is. I'm not sure. It looks the color of avocado, but it doesn't feel like avocado. I'll have to go back in my video and I'll make a little note of whatever it is that we put in there. I can't remember since it has been 10 days ago. Shows you how well my brain works. But yeah, there are tons of worms in here. This bin is doing great. So excited about it. It's okay to get excited about worms. The amount of stuff that they add and offer for your garden is fantastic, so that's why I get so excited about it. I'm really not seeing much of the food other than this stuff that I can't really identify. I can't tell what, or I'm not seeing any of the food that we were seeing. I know that we put some strawberries in here. That's got to be the avocado. The pumpkin, there's going to be the sweet potato that I had left over is totally gone. Yeah, that's avocado for sure. All right, well, I fed down the center last time. I'm going to get these worms back where they were happy. Get them back in here. They dive down pretty quick. I mean, they're do a vanishing act. Whatever this was back in there. Get this avocado back so they can have a party under there. Smooth this back over here. There's little pieces of corn. I do remember putting some corn in there last time. That looks like shredded paper. There's a potato peel that I put in there. I don't even know how long ago. It had to have been a few months, 2 months maybe. For whatever reason, these potato peels aren't breaking down that fast. The worms aren't attacking them. Get this sticker off. All right, so now I'm gonna go ahead and dig a trench on this side of the bin. I don't want to do the exact same spot. I like to get the worms to move around a little bit. Got some food here. I actually left it in the other room. I'll have to pause it real quick and go get that. But dig this trench here. I'm going to put down some regular dry bedding. Now I mixed all that wet bedding and cocoa coir because I want to put that on top. Since there's no bedding to see really in here, they really need more bedding in order to help them survive and be comfortable. So I've got that sitting aside. It's totally at the right moisture content now after I let it soak into the paper a little bit. But I'm gonna go get the food that I have. It was in the freezer, so now I've had it on the counter thawing. I'm gonna go grab it real quick so we can add it to this. Okay, got the food from the other room now. Here's some pumpkin from when we did our Halloween pumpkin carving. The remainder of that bag of strawberries and corn. Some of it's still frozen together. That's all right. I mentioned that the bin was a little bit warm where I had the food last. That's a sign of bacteria doing their thing. But you don't like it to get warm because a few things, the worms don't like it to be too warm. Regular compost bin, it's okay to have it heat up the way the bacteria and everything are working in that. It's a little bit different. So break up some of these strawberries a little bit, make it easier for the worms to be able to eat them. That one's solid, I'm not breaking that one. All right, have some amendments again. Just do a little bit of chicken feed. This is chicken pellets that you would use. I borrowed some from my neighbor who raises chickens because I've read that the worms love this stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and give them some. Again, add some char. Movies, there's gonna be videos on this will come in the future. Biochar is great stuff. It's char at this point. Some eggshell grit. And I forgot to do the experiment I wanted to show you guys last week, 10 days ago, about throwing some amendments of like these on top of the worm castings and how the worms will flock to it and really go to town on it. I'll do that this time since I forgot. I'm gonna call that good with the amendments this time. The amount of food I gave last time, I thought there would be a lot more left over. So apparently I have more worms in here and they're actively eating more than I thought they would be. So I probably could have done a little bit bigger of a feeding this time, but I don't have any more food thawed at this point. I'll get that potato skin back down in there a little bit. Smooth this over a little, be nice and gentle. Some more avocado skin. What is a piece of corn? Yeah, that's what that is. Okay, so the bedding I have soaked and pre-moistened. You might be wondering why I'm pre-moistening this, because I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. It is very dry here, especially during the winter. It's a desert here. And with the furnace on and the dry air right now, the air can't hold much moisture when it's this cold. I have to pre-moisten my bedding and put it in here. If I were to just put nothing but dry bedding, like some people do, you see a lot of worm videos, vermicompost people that do totally dry bedding and add it straight on top, and then maybe some of the food as well. But a lot of them live in more humid environments. They don't live in Utah where it's totally dry. And if I were to just put strictly dry bedding on top of this, it'd be too dry. The worms need some moisture. They breathe through their skin, and that requires them to be able to have some moisture on their skin in order for that exchange of oxygen to take place. Those carrots, I'm gonna just throw in there a little bit. Okay, I got all of this bedding. Again, I'm trying to really bulk up the volume of this bin. So I'm gonna dump this bedding on there. Bedding mixed with cocoa coir, or shredded paper mixed with cocoa coir. And I'll come back in and check on this. I mean, it won't be long, I'd say just a month or two, and it's going to be mostly castings again. You'll see that. I'll give you guys an update on that when it gets to that point. So I got all that bedding in there now. The worms should be nice and happy. They'll work their way through this, eating the bedding and dispersing their castings throughout it. But as part of our experiment, I'm going to go ahead and put a pile of bird seed here on top, like I mentioned last segment. And I'm going to put a pile of eggshell on here. And I'll just come back maybe tomorrow or just another day or two after this, and you'll see just how much they like the bird seed and the eggshell. Just a little check here on the eggshell and bird seed. Oh, the bird seed is left, but as you can see, the eggshell is mostly gone. I've done this in the past and seen tons and tons of worms on the bird seed. But they're already, you can see the castings and stuff that are starting to mix in on the top. They're doing their job.